Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our gambling training this morning. I know there's several of you online. Good morning. Welcome. Thanks for attending. I'd like to start off by saying we are a small but mighty crowd here today, and you know where for those of you here, you know where the restrooms are. To my left, your right, the ladies' room here, and the men's room far. We're just going to power right through because we're starting a little bit later. There is an event down here at Cobo Hall right across the street, so that may affect parking and people getting here on time. So that's the reason for a little bit of the late start. But we're going to be talking today about gambling, drinking, and drugging, and what are the similarities. I'd like to introduce our speaker for today. A lot of you know him, Mr. Michael Mooney. He is a native Detroiter who has dedicated his personal and professional life to assisting individuals afflicted with chemical dependency, problem gambling, and other mental health issues. His own recovery from chemical dependency and problem gambling began in early 1991, and this was the spark which motivated him to pursue his career as a mental health professional. Throughout the 1990s, Michael was employed at Metro Detroit Substance Abuse Clinic and rose to the rank of corporate manager. In 2002, Michael opened a substance abuse mental health agency in Macomb County called Choices Counseling Center. Although he and his staff offer a variety of mental health services, the primary focus of Choices Counseling Center is to provide not only outpatient addictions treatment to the criminal offender population, but most recently, over the past few years, Mike's focus has been mainly with people with gambling disorder, gambling issues. In addition, Mike has a real passion and a personal passion for working with gamblers and problem gamblers. I'd like to welcome Mike Mooney.
All right. So guys, I want to welcome everybody that's here in the audience. I know we have some people online, and as Lori just said, it's a little bit difficult to find a place to park here. But we have an interesting topic, a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And for the most part, I'm hoping to bring something to the attention of this viewing audience that may assist you if you're working with problem gamblers and families of, that may clarify some of the other issues that as a group of professionals that we may be dealing with. So when we take a look at what are the similarities of gambling, drinking, drugging, I like to think of this as the intersection where different type of disorders may converge. And so throughout the rest of this presentation, that'll primarily be our focus. I put this slide in here, and I used it in a previous presentation I did on bipolar. And the reason I like to use this slide is this is a person I got to know for some time. He had a gambling disorder, some other issues, but it just kind of like highlights, this is what we would typically call a millennial. And it's interesting that in today's social climate, how fascinated many people are becoming with gambling in general. And so when I saw this tattoo, I asked for permission that could I use it in these PowerPoints just to kind of illustrate the fascination many people are having. I want to briefly talk about a good friend of mine, Michael Burke. Michael Burke right now is the executive director of the Michigan Association of Problem Gambling and a good friend of mine. Michael, for some years, was the intake coordinator for Brighton Hospital. That was a local institution that did a lot of chemical dependency treatment admissions. And as you can see there, a recent study by Michael Burke revealed that only about 16% of substance abusers entering a local treatment program felt they had co-occurring problem gambling issues when they were coming into the program. So out of every 100 persons that would come into this intake process for drug treatment, only 16 coming in identified gambling as a co-occurring disorder too. And that got Michael to thinking, because guys, 16 out of 100 is a fairly low number. Why in the general community, we think that the statistics in just the general population is well above 16% that have gambling issues, right? So that got us to wonder, why is it that substance abusers seem to have a disproportionately low issue with gambling? And so what we looked at is that the 84 out of 100 that did not identify gambling as an issue while they were in their active addiction, what we concluded is that if they're in their active addiction, say with a substance, say it's like a cocaine or a narcotic, a pain pill, a heroin type of a drug, many people that develop an addiction to street drugs, for example, the black market cost, the hustling and rustling that goes day in, day out to get more, find more, feed your addiction, most addicts in active addiction, they put all their time and energy into that substance abusing. So at the end of the week, it's not likely that they got a big fat knot of money in their pocket to also enjoy some quality hours at the casino. So their primary addiction, say to alcohol and other drugs, did just fine with keeping them fairly dysfunctional and fairly abusive. So they didn't have room for another addiction is what I'm saying. So if you're chemically dependent during your active addiction, you probably don't have room for another addiction. But what we discovered is that if this 84% of the substance abusing population with no identified gambling issues coming into treatment, if this population should get clean, get sober, maintain some type of an abstinence from drugs, there is a very strong likelihood that this population will develop problem gambling issues in recovery. So as a clinician here in the Metro Detroit area, this is my 20th year doing problem gambling therapy, I see a disproportionate number of self-referrals coming directly out of 12-step fellowships, more than the general population. So in their active addiction, they have a low turnout at casinos because their primary addiction does just fine keeping them dysfunctional. But once they get clean, things may change. Now, on that topic, as some of you know, I'm a recovering person. Last January, I celebrated 27 years, absolutely clean, absolutely sober, 27 years. However, this coming Tuesday, 3-4 days from today, May 1st, will be my 23rd year gambling free. So if you do the math, I got clean 27 years ago, and I gambled for the first 4 years in my recovery, patting myself on the back with a great job I was doing staying clean. But meanwhile, in darkness and secrecy, I was getting caught up in some type of game. So there's a little disparity between my clean dates. Everybody probably is aware of what we mean by a family tree, right? Everybody has a family tree. You have parents, kids, nieces, nephews, right? So we're all kind of familiar with that family tree model. And guys, if we was to maybe go up to somebody's family tree and give it a vigorous shake, it may be interesting as to what type of nuts may fall out of the branches. So I'm here to say that there's not a whole lot of high-functioning, very stable family trees out there. There's always somebody in the mix that's a little disruptive. And so if we use that family tree model, let's say we have a family tree. And this family tree has several branches, right? And so one branch on the family tree is lovable Uncle Ernie. Lovable Uncle Ernie. And guys, the truth is rumor has it that Ernie is developing somewhat of a drinking problem. Why? He's already had several DUIs. And just last Christmas at the holidays, the whole family got together. And there at the big Christmas dinner with all the trimmings, Uncle Ernie got up to relieve himself. And as he was staggering down the hallway, he made a wrong turn, and he actually knocked over the Christmas tree, smashed into some of the presents, and as he laid there befuddled, he quietly passed out. But you know what? This is lovable Uncle Ernie. You got to take him as he is. Now, elsewhere in the family tree, we have Cousin Joey. And a few years ago, Cousin Joey turned 16, and he went through a radical change. Why? He up and quit school altogether. He changed his attitude, changed his appearance. And 2 weeks ago, Cousin Joey was over at Aunt Mabel's house. And after Joey left Aunt Mabel's house, she looked around, and by golly, her pocketbook was gone. Nowhere to be found. And the quiet whisper now is, Cousin Joey is on something called dope. Yeah, Cousin Joey's on something called dope. So Mabel gets on the phone. She alerts other family members what happened. She can't find her pocketbook. And right then and there's a family decision that Cousin Joey is now kicked out of the family. No more backyard summer barbecues. No more high school graduations. No more wedding receptions. He's out of the family. Pocketbook is gone. End of story. Elsewhere in the family tree, we have another branch. And guys, this branch is Grandma. Grandma. And Grandma's getting up in her years. She's actually residing in a senior citizens facility. And once a month at this facility, Grandma receives her Social Security check. And within a day or two of that check's arrival, the casinos, bless their heart, the casinos send over a large touring bus, and all the senior citizens clamber on board for an exciting day at the games. Why, it's wonderful. Everybody gets a little box lunch, $10 in comp tickets, right? A day or two after that casino outing, Grandma's been known to get on the telephone. Hi, honey, it's Grandma. Honey, can you let Grandma get about $100 so I can get some cosmetics and toiletries? But Granny, you just got your Social Security check. Oh, I know, honey, but Grandma's a little light this month. Could you help an old woman out? Now, my point is this. In this particular family tree, without a doubt, everybody's going to identify Uncle Ernie as an alcoholic. Hell, he passed out on top of the Christmas tree. Nobody's going to not agree that Cousin Joey has a drug problem. He ran off with Mabel's pocketbook. But guys, nobody is going to look at Grandma as having an addiction. They're not going to make that connection. Come on, it's just gambling. She's having a little bit of fun, right? So in our society at large, gambling remains a hidden addiction. But I know that as a disorder goes, it's right up there with the other two big ones, the drinking and the drugging, right? Now, why would most people not think that Grandma has an addiction? At best, maybe some people think she has a moral deficiency or weakness of willpower, but not a true addiction. And guys, if you look at it, this is what I see. Say we take Cousin Joey. For Cousin Joey to get drugs, he's got to go down somewhere called the hood. And there in the hood, there's a dope house, and it's dark, it's dangerous, it's scary. Why, even having a package in the palm of your hand is a felony. You can go to prison for simply possessing something. But meanwhile, Grandma's at a newly constructed, brightly lit casino. And there's gentlemen standing around with neckties, ladies in evening gowns, they're sipping fine champagne. And after a couple hours at the tables, they wind up the evening at a celebrity chef's restaurant, 5-star. It is legal, it is socially acceptable, and widely available. And so the perception in our community is that there's no similarities between Cousin Joey getting dope and Grandma at a modern casino. But I'm here to say that in the mind, in the brain, changes in chemistry, things like that, there are many distinct similarities. And so for the bulk of our lecture today, we're going to be focusing on some of these similarities. Guys, when we look at these three branches on the family tree, we got drinking, we got drugging, we got gambling, right? And when we take a look at these three different branches, we wonder, what do these branches have in common? And guys, the common denominator across the board, right, is there's only one central tree trunk. Three distinct different branches, but one tree trunk. So now when we take a look at that tree trunk to figure out what's going on with these disorders, we see that across the board, we can make a strong case that regardless of drinking, drugging, gambling, there appears to be some impulse control disorder going on. Impulsiveness, right? We also have some problems with inhibition. Guys, the root word from inhibition is inhibit, which means stop. And so what we're saying that with that impulse control disorder with drinking, drugging, gambling, it appears that addicts in general have a difficult time saying no to themselves when it comes to something that looks profitable, pleasurable, looks like fun, although there may be some baggage coming with it. There may be some strings attached. I once had a gambler desperately trying to save his marriage, save his life, and he had every reason in the world to not gambling, and he would verbalize that often in our sessions. And then one day he says that, you know what, I was driving down the highway after work Friday, I had my paycheck, and on my way home I glanced up and there was a billboard for one of the Detroit casinos. And almost on automatic pilot, zoom, he got off at the next exit ramp, and he said it was similar to being in a blackout. It was similar to a blackout that he gambled away his paycheck again, when prior to seeing that billboard, he had no conscious decision nor desire, but the billboard looked inviting, so off he went. And so when we look at that level of impulse control, we know that many people that have substance use disorders may have some legal issues. And if you have legal issues, there's a chance that you have to go see a probation officer, a parole officer, and there's a likelihood you're going to have to do a urine drop. And so if you know on such and such date, the second Tuesday of the month, I got a report, and on that second Tuesday of the month during my report, there's a likelihood I'm going to have to do a urine drop. It seems with that foreknowledge, nobody would test positive. Come on, you know in advance that day you're going to have to pee in a bottle. How could you? So the question is, do we never see dirty urines, or do we routinely see dirty urines? And if we routinely see dirty urines, and I'm speaking that this is part of that impulse control. Oh, I don't want consequences. I don't want a violation. But man, somebody offered me something and I could not say no. We're just coming out of this sixth season, just coming out of the winter months, right? And let's just say for a moment that you're not feeling well, right? And so you're not feeling too well, and you go see your doctor, and you say, hey, doc, I'm kind of feeling a little bit under the weather, and I'm not feeling like my old self. And the doctor does a little bit of an examination. He puts a thermometer in your mouth, you have an elevated temperature, and he gives you a clinical diagnosis of of fever. So you get this diagnosis of fever, you have that elevated temperature. Later on in the examination, you're muttering and sputtering, some upper respiratory issues, and you get a second diagnosis of congestion. And last but not least in his examination, you have a little bit of diarrhea. So now you have three formal diagnoses: fever, congestion, diarrhea. Perhaps we need to send you to 3 separate specialists and get you all patched up. Or we back up a little bit, look at the big picture. We have fever, congestion, diarrhea. Maybe you don't have 3 separate issues. Maybe you have the flu. And so if we treat the flu, there's a likelihood that these 3 issues are going to improve, right? And so with that model in mind, we look at the people that have a history of dysfunction, right? Alcoholism, drug abuse problem, gambling. Do we have 3 distinct different problems going on with 3 different therapeutic approaches? Now, we do have to fine-tune working with problem gamblers, and we'll touch on that too. But the reality, guys, if we look underneath these 3 disorders at the impulsivity, if we look at the inability to say no to yourself, that is what we're centrally looking at now with modern science and the addictive disorders, right? I'd like just to briefly talk about this classic experiment that went on a few years ago. And guys, I'm just going to paraphrase some of this stuff. I'm not going to get into exactly what Walter did. But some years ago in Stanford University, there was a professor, and he wanted to investigate delayed gratification, impulsivity, things along those natures, right? And so what Walter did is he put out the word for some volunteers, right? He wanted to get some volunteers to assist him with this experiment. And not just any volunteers, mind you. He specifically wanted like 20 parents that had 4-year-old children. So he wanted to do this interview with these 4-year-olds. And once he got it all set up, he lined these parents and their children outside of his office at the university. One by one, Walter would bring these children into his office. And it would go something like this. Hi, Timmy. My name is Walter. And I really want to thank you and your mother for coming down here today. This is important work. And by the way, Timmy, do you like marshmallows? And little 4-year-old Timmy say, oh, Walter, I love marshmallows. You do? Well, that's wonderful. Because, Timmy, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a marshmallow right now. And guys, with that, Walter would put a marshmallow on a paper plate and slide it across his desk to 4-year-old Timmy. But then Walter would announce, but hold on, Timmy, hold on. Before you eat that marshmallow, I have to excuse myself for just a few moments. And Timmy, if you wait until I return before you eat the marshmallow, why then I will reward you with another one. You can get 2 marshmallows, but you gotta wait a few moments. So as Walter would leave the office, 4-year-old Timmy wasn't aware that there were some video cameras taping his every move. And he looks at the marshmallow, he looks at the door, he starts fidgeting, squirming in his chair. And he ends up eating the marshmallow. He could not wait just a few moments to double the reward. And one after one of these 4-year-old children was the same outcome. The vast majority ate the marshmallow. Now, what Walter concluded was that at 4 years of age, there was some hard wiring, some part of the central nervous system, so to speak, that hasn't really come together to such a degree to allow a 4-year-old to control their impulsiveness, right? Even though there was a double reward being offered, the likelihood that they would eat the marshmallow was very, very strong, right? And so later on, he did the same type of a experiment, only this time he did it with 6-year-olds, right? And it was pretty much the same setup. Hi, Mary, my name is Walter. Do you like marshmallows? I've got to excuse myself for a few moments. And what he discovered that with the 6-year-olds, roughly 15 of the 6-year-olds, even though they squirmed around and they stared at the door, stared at that marshmallow, they were able to wait until he returned and thus was rewarded with another marshmallow. So now Walter's concluding that something between the age of 4 and something between the age of 6 is starting to come together in these children's brains, their ability to control their impulsiveness, to delay their gratification, to wait for a larger reward. If we did that same experiment, say with 8-year-old children, 28-year-old children, I'm sure all 8-year-olds could probably wait a few moments and get 2 marshmallows. But most of the 4-year-olds could not, and only 3/4 of the 6-year-olds could. So what Walter did, guys, he had a timeline going. The volunteers in this program, he tracked them for a number of years. And what he discovered that the children that were able to, the 6-year-olds that were able to wait until they got 2 marshmallows, later on in life, they did high with their academics. They had stable lives, they had careers, they had a lot of healthy things going on. The 5 out of the 26-year-olds that ate the marshmallow, this 5 with tracking seemed to have some impairments with decision making, not so high on the academic chart. So there was some general dysfunction shown all around, right? And so my theory is this. Say as an adult, you go to the casino and you tell yourself that you're going to leave at midnight, win or lose. Midnight comes, you up and leave. As an adult, you bring $200. When the money's gone, I'm out of here. The money's gone, you leave. If that's your situation as an adult, you're likely to have been one of the 15 6-year-olds that waited and got 2 marshmallows. Now, as an adult, you're going to gamble until midnight. 5 a.m. the following morning, there you sit. As an adult, you brought $200. 5 a.m. the following morning is your 3rd trip to the ATM. There's a likelihood that you would have been one of the 5 6-year-olds that impulsively ate the marshmallow, couldn't wait. And so it's just interesting that Walter did this in the late 60s and the early 70s, and years later in my own research with the addictive disorders and the gambling, I stumbled upon that some years ago, and it's just interesting that we got some correlation to what we actually see now. So guys, we're going to take a little brief look at the central nervous system, substance use and abuse, right? We're going to tie these addictions together. I would kind of think that in modern society, there are well over 1,000, perhaps 2,000 specific individual substances that people may use recreationally to get intoxicated, to get under the influence. There's a whole lot of certain products out there. And even though there's a whole lot of specific individual substances, when it comes to the central nervous system, we can kind of break that big picture of individual drugs down to 3 primary groups. I know there's a lot of individual drugs, but we got 3 primary ways that these substances interact with our central nervous system. On the one hand, we have a large group of substances that collectively we call the stimulants, right? Caffeine in coffee is a mild stimulant. You drink it, it helps wake you up. We got the energy drinks, the Monsters and the Red Bulls give you a little pep. But the high class, the high-powered stimulants is drugs like cocaine. You take cocaine and you could be up for a day or two, lots of strength, your engines are roaring, get a lot accomplished. We have the amphetamines. There's something on the news commonly called methamphetamine, and you know it's a highly addictive drug. Back in the day, we used to have diet pills, upper speed. We call these drugs speed. And even though there's a lot of individual type of stimulants, the bottom line, when you take one of these stimulants, you probably will have a lot of energy. You will lose any sense of tiredness or fatigue. It'll suppress your appetite. You'll have no hunger pains. And your mind is probably racing, right? You're on a speed, you're on an upper. We have another whole group, a whole category of central nervous system drugs, and we call these the depressants. And guys, I'm not going to fine-tune this. I kind of lump them together. We can make a case that there's narcotics in one category or a subcategory. We can say, what about tranquilizers? What about sedatives, alcohol? But for this presentation, we're just going to lump the depressants in one category. Of course, we do have the narcotic pain medications. There's also other narcotics, heroin and opiate-based drugs. Guys, if you do this long enough, if you do a lot of opiates, it could depress your central nervous system to the extent that you will stop breathing. It'll stop your heart. Alcohol is a major CNS depressant. If you drink too much, you will pass out. You can black out. It is an absolute, what we call like a downer type of a substance, right? Of course, we had all the tranquilizers and things like that, the benzodiazepines. And we got one other group of drugs that is not necessarily an upper, it's not a stimulant, it's not a downer, it's not necessarily a depressant. And these are the drugs we refer to as hallucinogenics. And even marijuana is a mild hallucinogenic. Some people report if they smoke marijuana, music is enhanced, if they wave their hand, they see trails, right? But then the high-powered hallucinogenics is the LSD, the mushrooms, psilocybin, things like that. And so the point is that with this class of drugs, it's not too much of a stimulant, it's not too much of a depressant. Instead, the user kind of goes sideways a little bit trippy. So even though there's 1,000+ individual substances, there's only 3 main mechanisms of actions with all of these different drugs, right? They either wake you up, put you down, or send you out on a little psychedelic trip. So we're going to get back to that in just a moment, right? When we talk about gambling, as I said before with grandma, it remains a hidden addiction in our society. Right now, we're in the middle of an opiate nationwide epidemic. Every day you turn on the news, there's something about the opiate epidemic. It's terrible. Right along those numbers, I personally see the devastation effects of problem gambling. I deal with a lot of gamblers. That's my primary work today, is working with gambling and gambler families. But it doesn't get the publicity. It's not tonight's lead-in story with the news. It's not tomorrow's headlines in the paper. Nobody really talks about problem gambling. And when we look at gambling, guys, we went from the lottery in the early 70s and horse race tracks is the only legal way you can gamble in Michigan. Some years ago, we had 2 forms of gambling. And today, we've just exploded gambling across the American landscape. It's become our American newest favorite pastime. Gamble, gamble, gamble. We have the 3-digit, the 4-digit, your fantasy fives, your mega balls, your power balls. My wife and I was in a restaurant last night where a friend of ours was in a band, and I noticed that they had 15 different ways to gamble, everything from pull tabs to Keno to you name it, video poker going on in this bar restaurant. You can get up to a $30 scratch-off ticket from a vending machine. You can gamble at the bowling alley. You can gamble at charity poker rooms. We have 28 casinos right now in the state of Michigan. 28, more on the drawing board. We got fantasy sports, betting with the bookies. You could simulcast a horse race right now, real time, with somebody racing in Florida. But the big one, guys, the big one by far is our electronic devices. Your cell phone is nothing less than a mini casino. There are hundreds and hundreds of sites you could access on your smartphone, right? And so we went from very, very limited gambling to now there's no possible way you can gamble that's not legal in Michigan. May 2017, almost 1 year ago to the date, Governor Rick Snyder signed into law legislation that now has Michigan the 4th state in the nation that legalized internet gambling. And the 3 Detroit casinos are hard at work right now. They're going to facilitate the internet gambling, and other states will follow suit. The Supreme Court right now is moving heavily towards legalizing sports betting, left up to the states. So again, there's no possible way you could place a bet that's not in your face, advertised, legal, promoted. And so when we look at gambling, when we look at drinking, when we look at drugging in general, guys, there's a little statement I got up there, and I love to talk about that. The beginning of the problem, often the chains of addiction start off too weak to be felt until they become too strong to be broken. And I do this group sometimes in substance abuse treatments and things like that. And I often say, Jesus, anybody remember going to that curiosity stage in your mid-teens, right? You smoked a little weed, giggle, 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 right? Where's the party? Nobody in substance abuse treatment groups that I currently do this, when they was a teenager giggling with a little weed, nobody predicted that somewhere down the road they're going to be in the treatment setting with me at a podium talking to them. You didn't see that coming as a kid, right? So oftentimes, especially with the gambling, it starts off so weak, so innocent. Curiosity, let's go downtown and see what it's all about. And of course, we know that over time, for many of us, something will reach out and grab you and pull you deeper and deeper into the madness. And so briefly, we got a couple things we want to talk about. There's different types of gamblers. There's different type of substance abusers. We got recreational users of alcohol and social use of marijuana and beverage alcohol. And we have something similar with gambling. There's a large group of people that by a class we refer to as the social players, right? We certainly have serious gamblers, and we got people with a gambling disorder. But guys, if we briefly just looked at the goal of the social gambler, these are primarily healthy men and women. These may be the 15, 6-year-olds that waited and got 2 marshmallows, right? That population. And their primary goal of gambling is to have some fun, to have some entertainment. As in, win or lose, I'm looking to have a good time. Now, we know right off the top, everybody would rather win than lose, but many people enjoy the outing whether they win or lose. So when we look at these social players, as a group, they have healthy boundaries. They never gamble with money they cannot lose. They never gamble longer than they planned on gambling. They have no obvious negative consequences. And as a group, as much as they like gambling, they probably also like bowling. They like going to the movies. They like going out to dinner. They like going dancing. They like going to the Pistons game. They like going to the rock and roll concert. They like going to the fireworks. Yes, they like gambling, but that's one activity with a repertoire of other things they equally enjoy. So they kind of spread this out over the calendar, right? Once in a while they go gamble just fine. Of course, we got the serious gambler, and typically the serious gambler may have got his initial startup from that social gambling group. And what often happens is that you can go there with social healthy boundaries, and maybe early in your gambling career you have a significant jackpot. Man, you hit for $5,000 one weekend. It was so exciting. Man, this was the greatest thing ever. And often when that happens, in a very short period of time, many, many gamblers will say, well, I would rather go back to the casino than go to the movies. I'd rather go to the casino than go bowling. Why would we go to a restaurant? They got a buffet at the casino. Why go to a rock and roll concert? They got a musician at the casino. It's like one-stop shopping. So for some people, what starts off almost innocent, over time they get a little bit of an escalation, and they certainly get a little bit more pulled into the gambling phenomenon, and they get a lot more serious about this. And oftentimes, you see at the bottom there, it starts off too weak to be felt, because now they've suddenly found their calling. This is so much fun, man. I work all weekend, or I work all week. Come Friday, Saturday night, I deserve some quality time. I deserve some entertainment, right? And so now we got the start of the downward spiral, right? For some gamblers, there's an escalation of excitement. Man, you can't wait to get back. You're staying longer than you planned on staying. You're spending money not earmarked for gambling, right? And so as this progresses, what started out maybe some years in the past as simple curiosity social playing, you go to this serious stage, and for many, many gamblers, they end up in this problem stage. And guys, on that note, we got a couple things we need just to clarify. We here at the HMSA, the Michigan Problem Gambling Program, we have a helpline, and if a caller was to dial us up, we announce that this is the Problem Gambling Helpline. So we use the word problem. Myself, others that are involved in some of these 12-step meetings, we refer to ourselves as compulsive gamblers. Not that long ago, scientifically, we refer to it as pathological gambling. And of course, today, we refer to it as gambling disorder. So we wonder, do we got 4 distinctly different behaviors up there or not? And I'm liking to say that even though we have different labels, we're briefly describing the same phenomenon. Maybe there's different levels of seriousness, right? But it would be much the same like you have a family member and you're getting concerned, you think he has a problem with drinking. And you talk to another family member and says, problem drinking, why my God, Tommy's a drunk. And together you get Tommy to go into a treatment facility, they do an assessment, and they label Tommy as alcoholic. So then you wonder, does he have a problem drinking? Is he a drunk? Is he an alcoholic? Or are these 3 different labels kind of describing the same type of phenomenon? And so we see that with the gambling too. Once a gambler crosses the line, gambling with money you cannot easily afford to lose, staying longer than you planned on staying. And usually around that time, you may find yourself not being truthful, a little bit deceitful to people that love you to cover up the nature and extent of your gambling. Once you cross those lines, this is where we start looking at that type of gambling as an addictive disorder, right? It's an addictive disorder along with other major addictive disorders, specifically alcoholism and chemical dependency or drug addiction. Substance use disorder is what we call it now. And guys, regardless of whether it's drinking, drugging, gambling, all addictions have some things in common. In addition to that impulsiveness that we spoke about before, guys, regardless of drinking, drugging, and gambling, or gambling, there's a fair amount of mental obsession that goes with these addictive disorders. When you're not gambling, you may be quietly reviewing in your mind's eye your last trip to the casino, and you say to yourself, geez, when they switched up the dealer, that should have been my signal to go home. I should not have sat there for 11 more hours. When you're not gambling, you're quietly wondering how you can get your hands on a few dollars to get your game on. When you're not gambling, you're wondering how on Friday night you could disappear from the prying eyes of family and friends without raising red flags of alarm to go downtown and get your game on. Hey, anybody seen Joey? I called his cell phone an hour ago, went right into voicemail. Well, it's Friday night, he's at the casino. And yet Joey thinks that he's so slick, nobody knows what I'm up to. And so when we look at addictive disorders, that mental obsession is across the board. Alcoholics are on an obsession to drink, substance users, abusers, right? Every day you're on the hunt, on the prowl, on a mission. It hijacks the brain with that mental obsession. And so in addition to the similarities of mental obsession, all these addictive disorders have a fair amount of physical compulsion. And the compulsion simply says that over time with this behavior, it may get out of hand with you eventually not having any say in the matter, right? So when we look at addictive disorders, the big ones, drinking, drugging, gambling, and we look at the mental obsession, the physical compulsion, when these two collide, the obsession and the compulsion, what comes through loud and clear is a loss of control. Somewhere over time, it got away from me. I don't have healthy boundaries anymore. And when we talk about that loss of control, it's as if you can no longer reliably predict, at least with any accuracy, what you may be doing later on tonight should you go back into a casino this afternoon. Maybe you can go into a casino this afternoon, play a couple games, leave out of there, be home with the wife and kids, no problem. Or maybe if you go into the casino this afternoon for a few hours, at 4 in the morning there you sit. And until you're actually there, you cannot predict whether you're going to be able to leave when you thought you was going to leave. And so we look at those type of behaviors, the obsession, the compulsion, the loss of control, and these are kind of like spread throughout the branches of that tree. This is right there with the impulse control, the lack of the ability to say no to yourself. And so again, I'm of the opinion that these addictive disorders have much more in common than they have different. I deal with a lot of gamblers. And most of the people I see, by far most of the people I see are American born and raised, educated. I see a fair amount of other people from other ethnicities. I see some Asians, I see some people with an Arabic background, but mostly I see Americans. And I know that as Americans, we are raised in a school system, an educational system, that probably somewhere in your middle years, you learn a little bit about arithmetic, your multiplication table, your longhand division. We all kind of are exposed to that in the modern American school system. And you get into high school, you got some advanced mathematics, maybe some algebra, right? Percentages, you're getting a little bit more involved in mathematics. And also in your American education, you have a fair amount of science classes. And guys, the goal of science, just in general, because there's a lot of different scientific disciplines, from geography to astrophysics, there's a lot of different specific science classes, but the thumbnail definition of science is reality-based. We're going to teach you something factual, something that is able to be evidenced, something you could prove, something that you could do your own experiment and come to the same conclusions that we have, right? So that's kind of the general nature of science. But usually in your high school studies, as much as you are being aware of science, the physical world, we also become aware of some concepts such as voodoo, witchcraft, and magic. But this is real. This is a bottle. It has weight. It takes up space. It'll cast a shadow. This exists. And as adults, we're supposed to know the difference between voodoo, witchcraft, magic, and reality. And I cannot begin to tell you how many adult Americans, educated, come into counseling with me, and they have developed this unrealistic reliance on superstitious mumbo jumbo. Man, I've heard it all. I've heard it all. They go down there with their four-leaf clover. They go down there with their lucky earrings. They wave their hands over the slot machines, line up all the pictures of the grandchildren, couple biblical verses. It starts to look like mental illness. It starts to look like mental illness, right? And so when we talk about a disorder in general, gambling isn't just a minor disturbance. Sometimes it'll hijack your brain in ways that it happens often slowly, that you don't perceive the big changes that is occurring. There's a publication. I know that the people in my audience here, you guys have some knowledge of clinical talk and things like that, and I'm sure some of the people online. Just briefly, we have what's called the DSM, and that stands for the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. So in layman terms, that's like the mental health Bible. So in this publication, anything that may affect the human mind with a disturbance, whether it's a phobia, whether it's some type of a disease process, it's going to be inside this publication. And so now we're at the 5th edition, the DSM-5. And if you can see there on the screen, the similarities between substance use disorder and gambling disorder was recently changed. I think it was back in 2013. We had the DSM-4 revised, the treatment revised, and in the DSM-4 we had a few years ago, gambling disorder or pathological gambling was elsewhere in this publication. It was actually listed under impulse control disorders, right? But a few years ago, after reviewing the scientific information, learning more about gambling as the disorder today we know it to be, it was moved from an impulse control disorder right into the category of the other two major addictive disorders, substance use disorders of alcohol and drug use, right? And the thing is that now we got 3 addictive disorders that we recognize scientifically. And the difference is, and sometimes people struggle with this concept of gambling being a disorder, is 2 of these addictions, the drinking and the drugging, are what we refer to as ingestive addictions. Drinking and drugging, you are going to ingest something into your system. You're going to drink something, drop something, snort something, smoke something, maybe inject something into a vein. But with these 2 addictions, you're going to put something outside of yourself into your system. It's going to make changes in brain chemistry, and the end result is you're going to be intoxicated or under the influence until that substance wears off. So this is probably what everybody in the country looks at as addictions, that you're taking something in, you get addicted to it. With disordered gambling, there's no ingesting. You're not putting something into your bloodstream, making changes in brain chemistry. Instead, it's the actual process of gambling itself, the heightened sense of alertness. You walk into the casino, your heart rate goes up a little bit, you're breathing rapid. Sometimes you may have a dilation with your pupils. You go into that state we refer to as inaction. And so even though you're not ingesting a substance in this type of a process addiction, if we did an MRI or a CT scan on your brain, there is a whole lot of similarities between somebody with a substance use disorder and somebody with a gambling disorder. So it appears that in the mind, the same chemical changes, dopamine, pleasure center, that happens with these ingestive addictions is absolutely occurring with the process disorder of gambling. And so we kind of like renewed some of our criteria, and we're not going to spend all this time on these slides here, but you can see up at the top, both the substance abuse and problem gambling are disorders resulting in negative consequences. So these are the similarities we see across the board with these addictive disorders. Whether it's gambling or using substances, there's a preoccupation. Oftentimes we have the characteristic withdrawal symptoms regardless of drinking or drug. Although with gambling, you don't go through that narcotic type of physical withdrawal. It's more of a mental, more of an emotional. Oftentimes the gambler finds himself starting off with penny ante games, and over the escalation of this disorder, now he's sitting at the VIP high stakes table with $1,000 a night. And at the bottom there, the repeated efforts to cut down and or control substance use or cut down and or stop gambling. So often, long before a gambler comes to terms with his or herself that I need to stop, they may go through a year-long period of time where they're wrestling in their mind, they're conflicted, they're trying to slow down, trying to maintain balance, trying to get some control again, and eventually they often call our problem gambling helpline. And so when we look at the big picture, as I said with the substances, right? Remember I said there's well over 1,000, maybe 2,000 individual substances that a person could use. There's uppers and downers and all-arounders and packs and cracks and drug-induced heart attacks and lots of individual different substances, but only a couple primary mechanisms of action. They stimulate, they depress, right? And so when we look at the gambling, we can make a lot of that same argument, right? There's a whole lot of ways you could gamble in modern society. And the casinos has a big slice of the overall pie, but we also have the lotteries and pull tabs, and just there's a lot of different individual ways you could place a bet. 99% of the time now it's 100% legal. And up there on the board, you see we got a lot of these different types of gambling and ways that you could place a bet. But kind of like with the substance use, right? Many of the ways that we can gamble in a modern society collectively appear to be like a central nervous system stimulant type of a game. They stimulate the nervous system. And then there's another large category of ways you could place a bet where they appear to be central nervous system depressant type of games, right? So similar with the substance use, some of them seem to get you elevated with excitement and stimulation, and some of them kind of make you a little bit more dreamy and hypnotic, trance-like. And so maybe it was 1 year ago, I was in this very, at this podium in this very room doing a presentation, and that presentation was on bipolar disorder and problem gambling. And I made a clear-cut case that with bipolar disorder, when some folks are unmedicated or in the manic phase, the excitement, the stimulation, there's certain games that they like to play, high-risk games, right? And some people that have a bipolar disorder, if they're in the depressed phase, they seem to favor the hypnotic kind of trance-like type of a games. And so now we're kind of bringing a couple different models together in that intersection. We can make a clear-cut case that some people that abuse stimulant drugs may have some similarities with mania of bipolar, and there's a type of game that they would prefer, while others may have depression, may abuse depressant drugs have a similarity with some of the games they choose to play. And we typically, we'll take a look at some of these exact models in just a moment. And so briefly, again, we get back to this screen here, the luck games and the central nervous system. And even though there's lots and lots of individual ways a person can place a bet, right? We just had them on the board, from casinos to lotteries. If we looked at all the ways you could place a bet in modern society, we could roughly break those ways that you could wager into two distinct different categories. Lots of individual games, two distinct categories. Lots of individual substances, primarily stimulants or primarily depressants. So it's along those lines, right? And so we look at some of these luck games, and by definition, a luck game simply refers to a way you could place a bet that if you're lucky, you will win some money. If you are not lucky, chances are you're gonna lose, right? And just to give you a little example with the coin toss. Now, those at home probably can't see it, but I was just talking to Michelle, who's new here at the Problem Gambling Program, right? Looking at Michelle now. Michelle, have you ever placed or ever played that game with the coin toss, heads or tails? I'm thinking you did. She said yes. So this is the drill. I take a quarter out of my pocket and I flip it in the air. And as that quarter is arcing in its trajectory, you call out heads. I flip the coin, you call heads. If you're lucky, that quarter will land heads up, you win, I lose, correct? I flip the quarter, you call head, it lands tails up, I win, you lose. And the reason we call a coin toss a pure luck game simply comes down to this. Once I launch that quarter, and it's arcing in its trajectory, at that very moment of time, mid-flight, and you call heads, we do not believe you have some fantastic mental power, and with your mind, you're going to make that quarter land heads up. We do not believe in your telepathy. We do not believe in your mind over matter, your supernatural capabilities. If you're lucky, you win. If I'm lucky, I win. Not only do we not think you can make that quarter land heads up, Michelle, I know I can't, and the real truth, we don't think anybody can, right? And so the other big luck games is the lottery. You get a 3-digit ticket. If you're lucky, tonight in Lansing, 7:30 in the evening, some ping pong balls in a little plastic box, they're sucked up a chute. If you're lucky, your number hits. If you're not lucky, it doesn't hit. And similar to that coin toss, once you buy your lottery ticket and you're quietly on your living room sofa watching the TV screen, when that drawing begins, we do not believe you're going to project some fantastic powers to those ping pong balls and make your number hit. We don't think you can. I know I can't, and the truth is, we don't think anybody can. It's a pure luck game. One of the big luck games currently that we're dealing with is the slot machines. And you can see this model with the old time slots. The one, remember, you put your money in, you pull back the one arm, you engage some mechanism, motors and gears are all twirling and whirling. So this is the drill. You sit there in front of your slot machine, you put in your money, you engage the mechanism. 3 wheels start rotating, they're spinning. If they stop, cherry, 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 right across the line, by golly, we got a winner, right? You sit there in front of that machine, you put in your money, you engage the mechanism, wheels are rotating, cherry, cherry, banana. Oh, we got a loser. Now, similar to that coin toss, similar to the lottery, we do not believe a slot player sitting on that stool outside that machine has any real influence over the outcome of that game. We do not believe with the powers of your mind you're going to predict where they're going to stop, you're going to gum up the mechanism, you're going to stop the gears. We don't think you can do that. So therefore, what I'm saying, and sometimes people want to argue this, there is no such thing as a good slot player. If you're telling me you are a good slot player, you are implying that somewhere behind the scenes, you've got some fantastic mental powers, and we don't believe you. It's a pure luck game. So the other big luck games is Keno, bingos. We got a lot of ways you could place a bet today that is primarily a luck game, right? On the other hand, we got another category of gambling that we call skill gambling, stimulant gambling, central nervous system. And the skill gambling, you see a couple I got up there on the screen there. If you have a skill, if you have a talent, if you've been practicing, there is a good chance that you may be able to influence your win column over your losses if you have talent. And the first one on the board, you see there is playing pool. And so oftentimes, people may develop a childhood fascination with playing pool. Maybe there's a pool table in the family home as you're growing up, and as a teenager, you're getting the balls to drop where you're aiming for, and you're getting fancy putting the stick behind your back. You're getting a little neighborhood reputation. You love to shoot pool. Your 25th birthday, your family kicks in, gets you a $975 German crafted, specially built balanced weight cue stick with its own separate $300 carrying alligator case. You love to play pool, you got a $1,000 stick. There's a good chance if you just go out to some local tavern and play a friendly game of pool, there's a good chance you're gonna win some money because you've been practicing for 20 years. You got a $1,000 cue stick, you love the game. So with playing pool, which is a skill game, you can influence your wins with your talent. But guys, you can't take that talent to a slot machine. That's a 100% luck game. So some of the differences between the skill games and the luck games, in big numbers, although the numbers are increasingly shrinking, but in big numbers, slightly more women favor skill gambling, slightly more women. We have a lot of women now that play major poker tournaments. We have a whole lot of guys that do nothing but play slot machines, but still in big numbers, there's a little bit of a division between the sexes with skill and with luck. Another little bit of a difference between these two ways of placing a bet is that skill gambling always involves human competition. There's other people you're playing against in a skill game. The vast majority of modern luck games are played in isolation. It's just you and the device, you quietly waiting for tonight's lottery to hit, you blankly staring at a lottery, or at the slot machine screen, or you're staring at a Keno screen. So the vast majority of luck games are played in isolation. It's just you, the player, and the game, where skill games always have some human competition. Some people really like to bowl. They get their own shoes, they get their own bowling ball, they get really good at it. They practice. And if you like to bowl and you're good at it, there's a chance you could win money. If you go to the bowling alley for the very first time and roll a lot of gutter balls, even though you will enjoy it, you probably won't win money. You don't have skill. So there's a distinct difference between the luck and the skill games, right? And so when we talk about poker, and guys, I'm referring to card poker, where you actually have a deck in your hands. There's a game at the casinos now called video poker. Very, very, very popular with many players. And video poker in general has the illusion of a skill game. And the reason it has that skill game illusion is that video poker is actually a two-step game, right? You could discard in video poker, giving the player the illusion of some type of control. The reason I am so emphatic that video poker is a 100% luck game is because at the very heart of that terminal, you have a sophisticated, programmable computer chip. And we highly, highly doubt the average player is going to consistently outsmart that computer. The illusion of control is there, you can discard, but it is a 100% luck game. And of course, you're just you and the machine, you're playing in isolation, just like somebody at a slot machine. But when you look at gambling in general, poker, where you actually got a deck of cards, most of us, somewhere in our childhood, we first got our hands on a deck of cards. And it comes to your attention that the higher the number, the more power the card has. A 7 has more power than a 3. A face card has more power than a numbered card. And there at the top of the deck, you have an ace. So we start to understand that, and usually in childhood, you start playing that age-old game called poker. And you learn that if you have 3 of a kind, your 3 of a kind has more power than your opponent's 2 pair. So you're starting to understand the mechanisms of basic poker. Later on in life, you're playing that age-old game called blackjack. Everybody here ever play blackjack? I'm sure that you did. May's saying yeah. All right, so this is the drill, May. You're playing blackjack. You're playing blackjack. You got 19. The dealer has 16. Do you take another hit? So May's saying no, she has 19, the dealer has 16. But I'm going to say, hold on, wait a minute. The game is actually 21. So theoretically, it is possible that from 19, you could draw a deuce and get right to 21. That could happen. However, you also are aware that at 16, any face card the dealer is going to bust, and half the numbered cards he's going to bust. So it's pretty safe to stay at 19. And so when we talk about card poker being a skill, this is where you learn when to hold them, when to fold them. Sometimes skilled poker players get fast on their feet. They're doing the mathematics in their mind. They're counting cards. There's a lot of techniques that they could use, percentages. There are skilled poker players that get very, very good with this type of gambling. But you can't take that skill of playing poker to the lottery. That's a luck game. Skill gambling is a little bit different, right? All right, so guys, when we look at some of this then, remember a moment ago I was talking about Walter Mischel, late 60s, early 70s? There's another noted American psychologist at that time. His name was Erik Erikson. And he's kind of like a laid-back guy, stage theorist, brilliant in his own ways. And Erikson has some comments to make on general society. And so the topic that he was discussing was that when we talk about healthy Americans, when we talk about people that seem to have a high functioning level, this is what he said. He says that during adulthood, we establish our careers, we settle down within a relationship, begin our own families, and develop a sense of being a part of the bigger picture. We give back to society through raising our children, being productive at work, and becoming involved in community activities and organizations. So in our general population, this would be maybe the model that we're striving for, to collectively have a sense of being well-balanced, a little serenity, contentness, right? Erikson added, by failing to achieve these objectives, we become stagnant and feel unproductive. Erikson believed if we see our lives as unproductive, feel guilt about our past, or feel that we did not accomplish our life goals, we become dissatisfied with life and develop despair, often leading to depression and hopelessness. And so now we take that into our modern society. We have a complex society. There's lots of competition. Unfortunately, there's only so much room at the top. And many, many people today are struggling to make ends meet, paycheck to paycheck existence, worried, financial problems, stress, frustration, tension, anxiety. These are regular visitors inside of many family trees. So there's a lot of tension, a lot of worry. And oftentimes people feel inadequate, insufficient with where they are in the station of life. And I've known for quite some times chemicals medicate emotional pain. So that's the driving force and act of addiction. Many people turn to chemicals as a quick fix for emotional pain. And what is the emotional pain? Many people feel that compared to what Erickson had for his contentness and serenity, we fall short. Man, my job isn't what I thought it would be. My marriage is questionable. My kids are acting out. I don't have a new car. I can't even replace the tires. I got a lot of drama going on. Reach for the bottle, reach for the bag, reach for the pipe, reach for whatever. Chemicals medicate emotional pain. But equally, along those exact same lines, oftentimes gambling starts off as a pleasant distraction. It's a pleasant distraction from elsewhere in your day, all this drama and trauma going on, the unhappiness. You just need to get away a little bit. Modern gaming is one-stop shopping. And so they offer a package. I like to equate a casino experience as being similar to taking your children to the Magic Kingdom. You guys know about the Magic Kingdom, Disney World? You take little 6-year-old Timmy to Disney World. Oh my God, mommy, look, there's the princess, there's the castle. It's cotton candy again. This is wonderful. Children have quite the exhilarating experience in the Magic Kingdom. But do you really think that's a princess? Or do you think that after her shift is over, she goes to her dressing room, changes her wardrobe, takes off her makeup, and she's somebody's mother? She's not really a princess. There's some illusion going on, right? And so just as kids get this fascination with the Magic Kingdom, modern gaming at the casino level is like the Magic Kingdom for adults. It's a fairyland. It's the adult amusement park. High stimulation, high excitement, people watching at its best, right? And it's one-stop shopping. You can get there and spend the whole day, have dinner, lots of different things to do. And so when we talk about, for some of us, gambling starts off as a pleasant distraction from emotional pain. Let's say that you have a fair amount of emotional pain on your plate. You have some discomfort, you have some tension, some anxiety. Maybe you're in a loveless marriage. Maybe the money's not there to pay the bills. And you go to this casino as a pleasant distraction. And by golly, you hit a $5,000 jackpot. Oh my God, this was wonderful. I won $5,000 at the casino. And so when that happens, what started off to be driven by a pleasant distraction from emotional pain, now it becomes a place that maybe the gaming itself can increase your finances so you can kind of make ends meet again. Maybe if I have these little jackpots, I could pay off some back bills, get on my feet again. So now gambling becomes almost like a part-time job. I work over here at my day job, and I got an evening job at Motor City. Geez, I'm a little light on money today. Let me stop at the casino and make a withdrawal. I'll make a withdrawal at the casino, right? My bank closes at 4 o'clock. I'll go to the casino. God rest his soul, but I had a recovering sponsor some years ago named Benny. And Benny said to me one day, he said this. He said, Mike, if you're in recovery, if you ever find yourself going to an ATM, and it's after midnight, you're probably doing something wrong. You're probably doing, if you're at an ATM and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever the hell you're doing, stop it. Stop. Anyway, so when we look at what Erickson was kind of like looking at there, that across this landscape, in the big picture, could we get like an agreement that in modern society there's a lot of unhappiness? I'm thinking that there's a lot of unhappiness. Everybody kind of knows what I'm talking about. And in the big, big picture, there's two different ways that people deal with that unhappiness. Now, on the one hand, we have a fair amount of people that are unhappy. One day they go see their physician. Hey, doc, I don't really know how to explain it, but I've been a little bit moody and gloomy the last few weeks, and I'm having a difficulty getting out of bed. Hell, there's days I don't even want to leave the house. And the doctor listens for a few moments and makes the clinical diagnosis of depression. And with that, he whips out his prescription pad and then writes for one of the many popular antidepressant medications. And the general theory is, if you're down in the dumps and you take one of these modern antidepressants, once it's in your system for several weeks, it'll get in your bloodstream and start subtly making changes in brain chemistry. And the end result is you come out of that funk. You got a little pep to your step, you're smiling, you can't wait to tackle the day. Well, basically, you were depressed, you're on a medication, and you feel better. So that's what half of the unhappy people in our society do. They go see their doctor and get an antidepressant type of a medication. On the other hand, we have an equally unhappy group of men and women, and they discovered that simply by ritualistically going to a modern casino and sitting in front of one of the many luck games, that while you're sitting there, you could zone out, you could blank out, you can get into a trance. Visions of sugar plums are dancing through your mind. It's wonderful. You could fantasize, daydream, and while you're sitting there, you have an elevation in your basic mood, right? While you're in that type of a trance-like state, there's some surface simulations or simulations with what somebody else is doing on a medication. And so this is what it comes down to. If basically you are unhappy and you go and see your physician and he prescribes you an antidepressant, modern health care, copay out of pocket, you may pay $20 a month for that treatment, the antidepressant. However, if you're unhappy and you're getting your antidepressant fix from a casino, this can cost you $100 a trip, $200 a trip, $500 over the weekend. And do that for 6 months. Do that for a year. Do that for 5 years. Do that for 10 years. And typically what happens with the staggering financial losses, many, many escaped gamblers are more depressed than ever. And so this is what it looks like. Basically, I'm unhappy. I never really felt I was living up to Erickson's vision. I'm not part of the society. I'm not doing okay. I don't have contentness. And I take this unhappiness to the casino. And I daydream, I fantasize. A few hours later, I leave $300 light. And leaving the casino, I'm even more desperate, more depressed than ever. And over time, I've trained myself, when I'm really down in the dumps, I get my butt back to the casino with a quickness. So I gamble to feel better, the money lost makes me feel worse, and my gambling is the solution. So it sets up that like that. Circular motion. And so that's typically where we see a lot of people making that desperation call to the helpline, that they've been at this for a number of years, the money's not there, there's a lot of other tension, relationship problems, you have it. And so when we look at the big picture here with the luck gambling and the escape, oftentimes when people play one of these modern luck games, say a slot machine at a casino, video poker, Keno, things like that, it is very similar to the central nervous system depressing drugs while you're actually sitting in front of that terminal, right? It's a a little bit of a downer, it's sedative, it's a tranquilizer, it's a pain pill, all rolled in one. Often gambling is a way to lose awareness of time, awareness of money lost, and people. Gambling may be a coping mechanism to forget overwhelming troubles and emotions. When we say that, could you imagine somebody that has a substance use disorder to one of like the sedative type of a drugs, like just the downers, or alcoholism? We often say you could drown your sorrows with alcohol. And so, and that being a major central nervous system depressant, the correlation is something that I'm seeing with some of these gamblers, that is almost like I'm addicted to some type of a downer, or some type of a hypnotic, something that is on the surface a pleasant distraction. Gambling may be used to escape, soothe, reduce stress. And so when we look at near the bottom, the mental health issues common is depression and anxiety. And this is what many people, what I say before, chemicals medicate emotional pain. And so we just wanted just to put a couple words on that emotional pain. Anxiety, loneliness is a huge one. Unhappiness, depression, tension, frustration, anger issues. And so oftentimes the chronic gambler will find themselves going to that type of a casino, that type of a gaming category for mood management. And again, when you're actually under the influence, when you're in the magic kingdom, it's like cotton candy for the mind. And many, many gamblers will report that, man, it's almost like I was in a blackout state of being. I can't even remember my children's name when I'm sitting in front of that slot machine. I can't keep track of the passage of time. Oftentimes gambling, we look at the problem side of gambling simply with financial terms, like, oh, look, I won some money, no problem. Or, oh, I lost again, there's a problem. And oftentimes when we look at problem gambling in financial terms, we certainly see the evidence to make that a clear case. But I'm here to say that for many players, in addition to financial losses, many gamblers could lose time. And you end up staying much longer than you planned on staying. When we were talking about that, the skill gambling, oftentimes there's gamblers that can get in some type of a tournament and just be there for like incredible amounts of time. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just 1 second, right? So when we talk about the skill gambling versus the escape gambling, nobody could lose a significant amount of money over time and be happy, be ecstatic. So there's a common denominator of depression right across the board with skill and luck players. But in addition, skill gamblers, we call them the action players, there's always that competitive side to these games. A lot of excitement, adrenaline, testosterone, stimulation. It has many of the same effects as somebody on a stimulant drug. And so I did have this one gambler who said, Mike, I went to the casino on Friday afternoon and I started playing poker and I did not leave until Sunday evening. And I'm calculating the time, Friday afternoon, Sunday evening. You were there well over 48 hours. Well, tell me, during that time, did you at least get a hotel room? Did you take a break? Did you go to sleep? He said, nah, I just gambled right through the night. That's a long time to play poker. During that 48 plus hours, did you at least have dinner, lunch, breakfast breaks? He said, no, I had a beer and a pretzel, but don't worry, when I get home later on in the evening, I'll fix myself a nice breakfast and go to bed. So now I'm thinking, you gambled for 48 plus hours, no sense of fatigue, no tiredness, no sleep. You gambled for 2 solid days, and you had no hunger pains, no appetites. My God, it looks like you're on speed. It looks just like somebody else on crack cocaine over the weekend. Just a rush of excitement, stimulation, up for a couple days. And this is not an ingestive. This is not something coming into his body. This is the process of addiction. So something in his mind is churning out an amphetamine type like substance. And so there's a lot to be said about how these addictive disorders have a lot more in common than different. And so, when it comes to gambling in general, and those of us that work with problem gamblers, we know it very well, that there is a relapse phenomenon very, very often associated with problem gambling. And at some personal level, the actual reason a person would relapse is individual as anyone where they're at any 1 minute of the day. But collectively, I look at this relapse process and I see some similarities, right? Say we got a guy named Charlie, and Charlie likes to play blackjack. And over time, Charlie falls in a pattern. Every Friday after work, he goes down to the casino and he has his favorite few hours playing blackjack. And year after year, he's at that blackjack table on a Friday night, and of course, the losses mount up, and eventually, there comes a day that Charlie can't afford to play cards anymore. And so even though he would rather stay, he got to get honest with himself. I can't go. I don't have the money. I have to stop. So after several years of doing this, there comes a Friday night. Rather than go to the casino, Charlie stays at home. And his wife is a little bit surprised. Geez, honey, it's been quite some time since we had the privilege of you being home with us on a Friday night. So what do you say in your honor? I'll run right into the kitchen and I'll prepare us a real nice supper, and then we could quietly watch television. Would you like that, Charlie? Would you like that? And Charlie thinks to himself, Friday night with the family, dinner followed by television. Boring. I know, Charlie, maybe next weekend we can all go to the mall and do some window shopping. Would you like that, Charlie? Would you like that? Window shopping at the mall. Boring. Maybe we can go on a picnic. Boring. Guys, after some months or years of high-level skill gambling at a modern casino, everything is boring in comparison in modern society. Nothing comes close to the high level of excitement and stimulation offered at a casino. And it's not so much that dinner with the family is boring or going on a picnic is boring. The reality is many gamblers over time artificially enhance their need for excitement and stimulation right through the roof. So by comparison, it looks boring the first year or so when you try to stop. What many gamblers call boredom in early recovery, I beg to differ. I say maybe you're not bored, maybe you're actually calm. And it's been quite some time that you just sat in a chair on a Friday night without getting jittery, without getting antsy. I need to be distracted. I need to go somewhere. Because in early recovery, without the masquerade of gambling, the artificial stimulation, sometimes people are left with their own thoughts, not under the influence, and they don't like what they see. I've made a mess of my life. Like Erickson was saying, I have this hopelessness, this despair. I need to get pleasantly distracted. Oh, I can't even afford it no more. I'll just chip into my mortgage money. I'll take some of my food money. This uncomfortableness outside of that gambling arena is killing me. And so oftentimes on one level, a gambler will tell you consciously, oh yeah, I need to stop, I know that, and then still gamble or get a little gambling clean time under their belt. Sometimes there's what I like to refer to as a secondary level of denial. Not a primary denial. Primary denial is, oh, I got a gambling problem. I beg to differ. I don't see it. Many times gamblers don't have that primary denial, especially when they see me. They know they have a problem gambling. But they have that secondary denial that even though I accept my diagnosis, even though I agree I'm a problem gambler, I'm in denial as to whether I really need to do the recovery walk. Oh, I know I got a problem, but meetings, I don't have time for that. Get a sponsor, look at literature, develop some recovery supports. I don't need to do that. I just want to come here every week and unload on you in a one-on-one, but I don't really need to do something outside of this therapy. And so it's like a secondary denial that keeps them basically sick, if that makes any sense. So when we look at the treatment implications of what we're referring to here, why do some people with substance use disorder sometimes develop gambling addiction? And so when we look at the latest research, and again, there's two primary tracks of gambling. There's the escape gambling, there's the skill gambling, there's luck, there's things along those lines. On the one hand, excessive gambling may be connected to impulsivity. Remember Walter and the marshmallows? A person with a heightened sense of alertness may have problems controlling impulses. Those control issues manifest themselves in many ways. For example, some people develop a shopping addiction, while others engage in risky sexual behavior. However, for some skill action gamblers, it is gambling that provides the outlet for impulsive tendencies. And those of you that was here with me last year when we were focusing on bipolar disorder, right? Sometimes it's the mania, it's the heightened sense of alertness with mania that has that same impulsive tendencies. On the other hand, excessive gambling can be used to self-medicate depression. Gambling can produce a feeling much like the buzz of an alcoholic drink or the high of an abused drug, helping a depressed person feel better for a short time. And these are your escape gamblers. These are your luck players. People with generalized unhappiness may develop problem gambling during depressive phases because they believe the activity relieves depression symptoms, while other people go and see their physician, maybe get on an antidepressant. So when we look at providing therapy, if you are a clinician and you only seen substance abusers, and now you think with your qualifications, you're a counselor, that you should be able to see gamblers too, it is imperative that you understand some of the basics here, that we have different kind of gamblers. It's not one size fits all. Oh, you got a problem gambling, I know what to do with you. In the big picture, problem gamblers fall into two basic types. We got the skill action gamblers versus the luck escape players. We have some people that get abusive with stimulant drugs, some people that only look at the depressants, the downers, the heroin, the narcotics. Skill action gamblers have similarity with substance use disorder clients that abuse stimulants and are often chasing excitement and adrenaline. I can make a clear-cut case for many gamblers. Part of the actual addiction is to their own body's enhanced response of being in action. The stimulation, the adrenaline, the testosterone. So there's like an addiction to your own changes in body chemistry while you're actually in action at the casino. Of course, we got the luck escape players, may have underlying features of depression and loneliness. And when we tie these addictive disorders together, remember the family tree, the branches, drinking, drugging, gambling. Lots of people may say, well, geez, there's process addiction of gambling, there's the ingestive addictions of drinking and drugging. They're not quite the same. I know what the general theory is, but I find it interesting that with all three addictive disorders, there's the likelihood of a favorable response with 12-step meeting referral. Many alcoholics finally sober up through a process of 12 steps with Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a growing number of people having successful lives in a group called Narcotics Anonymous. And even though gambling is a process, not an ingestive addiction, we have a whole lot of statistics that say if a problem gambler stabilizes in GA, and by that I mean eventually come out of hiding, get honest with their disclosures, allows the group to get to know them, they get to know the group, they look at the program, they look at the steps, they get a sponsor, identify a home group. Many problem gamblers will have a restoration of normalcy, gambling free. So when we look at the differences between the ingestive versus the process addictions, the similarities are overwhelming how we get better. So we get better. It's almost like it's a spiritual disorder as much as anything else. And oftentimes people's spiritual needs are met at these various groups and meetings and things like that. So in conclusion, we talked all this so far, Michelle, about the similarities. Remember that? The family tree, the obsession, the compulsion. As much as there's a lot of similarities between drinking, drugging, and gambling, there are some differences. And I'd like to point those differences out. Difference number one, you will never see an alcoholic that is convinced that he is but one drink away from complete success. You think there's alcoholics out there thinking they're one bottle away from success? You think there's substance abusers thinking they're one rock of cocaine away from complete success? When it comes to gamblers, no matter how far down the financial rungs of the ladder they go, they still got it in their head that I'm just one throw of the dice, one spin of the wheel, one play of cards, one lottery number, one something away from turning it all around and being successful. And so oftentimes, unlike the substance abusers, gamblers develop this false sense of hope that they gamble their way into a deep, dark financial hole, and often in their minds, they're convinced that their solution is to eventually gamble back to success. And so that's one of the illusions that in therapy we have to work on. That it's difficult for many gamblers to admit complete defeat, to say, I'm powerless over my gambling, I need to stop. Because if you're at that level where you say, I need to stop, you have to internalize for real that the money is gone. It's gone, period. And as long as you have that one little ray of hope on one lottery ticket, one this, one that away from getting it back, it'll keep you in your sickness way past your expiration date. And so that's one of the things when we look at this recovery. We have one model for some people, and maybe a little bit more like the earlier problem gamblers, we refer to as harm reduction. But for the ongoing chronic gambler, we believe in gambling abstinence. There comes a time that you stop. And so one of the arguments I get presently in therapy is, geez, Mike, my problem is blackjack at the casino. Are you telling me I can't even buy lottery tickets? And I understand the theory, but if a person had 2 drunk driving tickets because of vodka, and they're in outpatient alcohol counseling, and they're saying, well, geez, I need to leave the vodka alone. I'll just go back to drinking wine. And we say, well, it's not necessarily the vodka or the wine. The number one beverage of drunk drivers in Michigan is beer. And it's a little bit watered down. So it's whether it's alcohol in the vodka, the whiskey, the wine, the beer, you have to stop drinking. We never tell an alcoholic, well, just leave the vodka alone and by all means drink beer. And so we don't tell the gambler, well, just stay away from the VIP blackjack table at the casino, but sit there in the bar all evening and play Keno. We say at some point you need to stop. And many, many gamblers, they struggle with that concept. And guys, the other area where there's a major difference between drinking, drugging, and gambling. Both drinking and drugging can cause death. You could overdose, car accidents, fatalities. Alcohol and drugs can kill you, but only gambling will make you kill yourself. We don't see that with the drinking and the drugging. Gambling will make you commit suicide, right? And so, like in the city of Las Vegas, and I'm quoting some statistics from some years ago. Guys, I've been doing this problem gambling therapy now, this is my 20th year. But way back in the 90s or so, I remember I got a statistic that the city with the highest suicide rate in the nation was Las Vegas, Nevada, the highest suicide rate. And so with that said, my friends, we got a couple references. And again, I have my good friend Michael Burke and the statistics at Brighton Hospital. And last but not least, we have a couple phone numbers there. If you have problem gamblers on your caseload, and depending who's in this audience that I do this presentation, there is the Michigan Gambling Disorder Treatment Program, our 24/7 helpline. We got some of the helpline people and gambling program people in the audience. In the middle there, we got the Michigan Association of Problem Gambling, of which I was the vice president for a couple years. Now I'm the affiliate alternative to the National Council from the state of Michigan. And we got a lot of things that we're doing at the Michigan Association of Problem Gambling. We have a website. We have other learning tools and helpful hints and things like that. So there's our Lansing number. And of course, at the very bottom, there's my Choices Counseling. I'm headquartered in Roseville, Michigan. And again, primarily, I'm an outpatient treatment provider for the state problem gambling program. And I'm a little bit on the east, north of Detroit, Macomb County. But I get many, many people from central Detroit. I've got gamblers come to see me from Ann Arbor, Port Huron, Wyandotte, Ypsilanti. But most of what I do is in the Macomb County area. And so that said, my friends, it's a wrap. I enjoyed talking with you guys, and maybe we'll come up with another topic in the next 6 months or so. Thank you.